Hello, welcome again to Talk Architecture Podcast. The episode now that we shall deal with for architecture education is the title The Real World Example, The Invisible Masterpiece. This is a final sort of conclusive piece at the moment. We might have a interview with Sashan Design in the future. But for now, we will conclude what has been published in the recent podcast episodes. I will take about 15 to 20 minutes to reflect on something that we need to understand seriously about architecture education. We will look into an example of a project that represents the true north of architecture, but might be invisible to a university ranking algorithm. And therefore, I present to you today the real world example, the invisible masterpiece. The scenario is given that a university studio works for 3 years is being done with a remote, marginalized community to build a sustainable bamboo school or a disaster resilient community center. Now, although this is proposed that you imagine such a work for 3 years by a university studio, this reflects many projects that have been done before. Even for a design thesis, which is 1 year long, we've had projects like this, like the street church, like the Aboriginal or the Orang Asli community buildings or the school that we've had before these projects. And the students were involved, had really grown or learned a lot from such a project, which is small scale and site context specific. They tackle all sorts of design problems. For example, a school or a community center, even building a detail, 1:1 detail of the school or the community center. Much of their research is grounded in context specificities, meaning they actually visited the site and interviewed the community that they were trying to build for. There are other different variations of projects such as this for the design thesis. But what would like to point out here, how this sort of a project, which is very satisfying and have a really deep learning curve, fail in the rankings. Why this sort of project is not encouraged in schools of architecture now when rankings become something that is prioritized. Number one, there are no citations. The project results in a built structure and a transformed community, not necessarily a paper in a high-impact Q1 journal. You can imagine if this project takes 3 years. You can imagine if a tutor lead this project and students signed up for it for 3 years. They keep on doing this like a pet project each semester as part of, you can change the curriculum. And you can get the most impactful project out there, actually. But the fact is we are encumbered by the ranking system or the rankings. So why does it fail in the rankings? Low efficiency. Rankings love high graduation rates and fast throughput. This project is slow, messy, and involves wasted time building relationships. what is university education but to build relationships? And you're interested in examining this community, but we didn't design any design studio for that. So it's also low in the ranking, or fails in the rankings, because it has no international prestige. It is not a shiny museum in this capital city. It's a humble structure that doesn't trend on global architecture news sites that ranking surveyors might follow. So remember the Vice Chancellor's compass of good. Why it wins the compass of good? Humanitarian impact. It provides educational safety to people who had none. There is student growth. The students learn empathy, resourcefulness, and real-world ethics, things a Scopus index paper cannot teach. And the true rank, as the Vice Chancellor said, this is the noble work that actually makes the world a better place. So, this is the architecture of the invisible. Why the best design work never makes the rankings. This is how it is. Think about this invisible masterpiece, this project. Imagine a studio that spends an entire semester in a rural village working with local craftsmen to solve a flooding crisis. It's the highest form of architecture. It's the compass of good in action. Why aren't we being flexible and trying to get a studio curriculum like this? But here's the irony. On a university ranking spreadsheet, that project is a ghost. It doesn't generate research citations. It doesn't bring in international student revenue. In the eyes of a global algorithm, that profound act of teaching and service is worth less than a mediocre, the theoretical paper published in an obscure journal. You see? Such an impact, but it's compared worth less than an obscure journal article. If we follow the rankings, we're essentially telling our students that solving a village's problem is less prestigious than being cited by a peer in London or New York. Therefore, a powerful call to action is needed. The manifesto of a true north in the studio. We have been told for too long that the value of our education is a number on a list. We have been conditioned to believe that a university's prestige is built on the thickness of its journals and the height of its global standing. But architecture is not a spreadsheet. It is an act of service. If we follow the Vice Chancellor's compass of good, then we must admit a hard truth. A ranking cannot measure the soul of a building. A ranking cannot measure the dignity of a student restores to a community through a thoughtful design. It cannot measure the late-night epiphany in the studio when a student realizes their work isn't about them, but about people who will live within their walls. So here's a challenge to the educators, the system, those who create the system, the students and the practitioners. Stop designing for the data. Start designing for the doubtful, the displaced, and the discarded. Community projects are great. Stop chasing the citation. Start chasing the impact. If the rankings reward us for doing the right thing, we welcome them. But they demand we trade our humanity for a higher decimal point, when we choose to stay exactly where we are. Because our true rank isn't found in a brochure in London or a database in New York. It is found in the shade of the trees we plant, the strength of the schools we build, and the ethical backbone of the graduates we send out into the world. Let the world chase the chart. We will follow the compass, because in the end, we don't build to be ranked. We build to be useful. Okay, that is it. That is the manifesto conclusion based on the invisible masterpiece, the architectural masterpiece of a project that the student who really wants to discover themselves would do. And I thank you for listening to this. Several episodes of the problems of architecture education. And we need to move on and go to the next episode. Take care.